looking at a map here in general with many of the larger schools in the area. For this purpose, it's not a direct district consideration because we've got a different sport on the screen right now because we don't have a direct district model. But what this shows is how potentially difficult it can be to put teams in strict 8-team districts. You're seeing a lot of spread out here in terms of, let's just start up here in the top corner. You've got a district that's going to require bringing in a team from a fair distance away and kind of pulling away from their natural rivals. This is what's got to happen because you've got a smaller number of schools around the Rockford area that's going to need another school or two to fill out their district and make it an 8-team district. So what's going to happen is you've got DeKalb dragged in from over here and Huntley dragged in from over there. And that's interesting to just kind of take a note of because DeKalb is considerably farther south than many of these teams over here. So if you're thinking in just a north-south type of frame of mind, you probably wouldn't see this pairing, but it actually kind of makes pretty good sense to kind of link them that way. It gets a little bit more complicated when you get up into the northwest suburbs over here because you're seeing a group in teams with like Cary Grove, Lake Zurich, Round Lake, and they seem to be natural fits to one another. But then you're noticing some teams that are very, very close by that are in an entirely different district. So then you have to start drawing lines, very narrow lines between schools, whether or not they're going to stay in a group that's closer to where they're at, or if they're going to be added to another one, a district over there, to balance it at 8 teams. So there's really some razor-thin situations. And if you go farther down into the center here, you've got a group right here that's grouped in 10 teams. Obviously, you're going to have 8-team districts, but you've got neighboring teams that are really, really close together with those teams. So how the dividing line is decided between which teams go to the west side of that district and which teams go to the east side of that district are going to be very interesting because you can't take more than 8 teams, you can't take less than 8 teams. And there are going to be some situations, and you're noticing them right here, especially in this green section where there are 10 teams marked in here. They are very, very congested, but you can only have 8. So you're going to have to move 2 out, and then you're going to have teams like in this situation right here where you've got one team kind of standing out here on the outside, and you've got to kind of link them naturally to the teams that are closest to them there. So that's going to get interesting in a lot of situations where you're going to have one team, in this case Hampshire, that's outside of that group. And then you go even farther south down, and this is where it gets real interesting, especially in the constructs of 7 and 8A, where you're going to need to bring teams from the south suburbs to go down to the Metro East St. Louis area to form out a full district. None of the Metro East St. Louis areas, the divisions that we have, currently have enough teams to make an 8-team district on their own. So there are going to be some schools, and in this case, you're seeing York is dragged down, which is different than almost anything that I've projected at this point in time. I've usually had them more with these teams. Manuka almost seems to be a candidate to go south at all times. The 2 Joliet schools, Joliet Central, Joliet West, are 2 teams that could be a consideration for that. Here, they're mirrored in with a lot of these south suburb schools that will probably be put in a district all of their own when it comes to that time. So you see where you're going to have some really creative mapping issues in regards to how these teams are fit. I mean, I'm looking at this right now. I see 3 colors here that conceivably form a 8-team district, and they're in 3. And in this situation, they're in 3 different groupings. But if you just kind of turn your line of view just a little bit, you can see how those teams would form an 8-team district. So they're very, very close. There's going to be some very interesting decisions made based on whether or not north-south decides it, east-west decides it, and the outliers are going to be the big factor in terms of where they're put to make districts of 8, because they have to be put somewhere. They can't be left out there on an island by themselves. So there's going to be a lot of complicated mapping issues, and you're seeing a lot of cluster right here. This is very similar to the way the maps will look for 7A, 8A, and in some respects 6A, where there's just going to be a bunch of teams in a concentrated area, and often more than 8. So you're going to have to find situations where you can break a team off. And there's going to be school districts where you're used to them having opponents that are from your neighbor, that you're going to be in 2 different districts because it's simply the way the math has to work.